welcome everybody. I suspect we have alumni from all over the world. So welcome to this session on why are leadership lessons from sport useful in life. So my name is Joan Lazenby. I'm a professor of engineering here at Cambridge, and I'm actually standing in for the Deputy Director of Sport tonight. But it's my absolute pleasure to have two of our wonderful alumni to talk. As you will have seen from the website, we were supposed to have three, but Dr. Kath Bishop isn't able to be with us tonight. But she does say that she has an amazing book out. So if you would like to have a look at her book, then please do. So let me introduce our panel tonight. So first of all, we have Sarah Winckless, MBE. I knew Sarah as an athlete before she was a rower. She was quite a formidable discus thrower, as well as being an amazing rower. And as you've read, Sarah competed in all sorts of sports before rowing, but became an Olympic bronze medalist, double world champion, chef de mission for Team England in 2018, and has had since then an amazing career as a consultant, talking on leadership effectively. And our other panelist is Dr. Anna Bebington-Watkins. Anna Watkins, when she won her medals, Anna was at Unum, and something I didn't know was Anna was a PhD student in maths. So that was news for me. I was also a mathematician in my youth. So Anna started rowing at Cambridge, again joined the British team, afterwards achieved a bronze medal in Beijing, Olympic best time, ergo world record. You will have read the website. So Anna has been a consultant at McKinsey's. Both Sarah and Anna, and indeed Kath, give inspirational talks. So I'm hoping tonight you will enjoy their conversation, and then you can participate in a question and answer session. So I'm going to hand over to Anna to start the session.
Thanks very much, Joan. Thanks for your kindness in stepping in to join us for the session. And thanks everybody who has joined us. Hopefully you're there. So what we'd really like to do this evening is we'd like to explore the transformation that we've seen over our lifetimes in elite sport and in women's sport in particular, and in Cambridge sport. We've experienced that in lots of different ways, you know, as students, and Sarah more particularly has stayed involved in sport in a leadership capacity. We want to sort of find out and compare between the two of us how this has shaped our beliefs about life, how being involved with sport has shaped our beliefs about life, about performance, and about leadership. And we really want this to be a conversation that we share with you as well as the audience. So we really do, you know, echo what Jane said, put some questions into the chat and we'll pick those up towards the second half of the session. So when I was a student here, I had a couple of very significant role models as a beginner rower, and they were Sarah and Kath, being the Cambridge graduates who were then leading the way in the British women's squad. So I would like to kick off by asking Sarah. Sarah, in your early experiences, could you paint a picture for us of your first attempts at rowing and what your experiences were through those first days of rowing at Cambridge as well?
Yeah, no, I will, and thank you. It's a funny thing to be called a role model by an Olympic champion, but thank you for that honour, actually. We don't get to choose to be people's role models. I think we only realise that we've had that responsibility afterwards, actually. And as Joan said, I was not a rower coming into Cambridge. I was a netball player, basketball player. I threw the discus, and I've got blues in my first year throwing the discus. I think I still hold that record, actually, which is a real honour for that varsity match. And we'd won the netball match. So I loved Cambridge, and I was loving the learning, and I was loving my sport. And I had no real intention, actually, to do do much in rowing. My discus was nearly good enough to go to the Commonwealth Games, so I was pushing that mountain, if you like, and that was my sort of goal. So I really paid attention to the international scene, but the athletic scene, not anything else. And it was sort of that year that I didn't get selected. I qualified, I threw far enough to go to those Commonwealth Games, and I didn't get selected, which was one of the things you learn in sport. You can go over a bar and not necessarily be considered the right person, the best person to do that role. So I ended up being left at Cambridge that summer, or in a bit of a loose end, rather than getting on a plane to Canada. And I'd done a bit of rowing at Fitzwilliam. I'd really, really enjoyed that. But I started to test myself in what they call the dev squad at the time for the CUWBC. And I got myself into an 8. And the main thing for me was I going to be brave enough to be able to do 6 minutes of work, because it was a 2,000 metre race. And I was a sprint athlete. As a discus thrower, as a netball player, I played one end of the court. As a basketball player, you could come off if you got a bit tired. And, you know, in rowing, as we know, it's you start, you go hard, and then you test yourself and go a bit harder. So it was something I was really, really scared of, actually. I was scared that I would find I wasn't strong enough to do that sport. And that was quite seductive, to find something out about myself.
And what adjustments were you making then to transition from discus and your other many sports, crazy number of sports, into being a pure hardcore rower?
I think physiologically, of course, I had to learn the technical, but it was a belief system. So if we think about leadership, a lot of our behaviour is driven by what you can't see, people's beliefs. And I talked about it just now. I believed I was a sprint athlete. I'd spent a lot of time training my short twitch fibre, and I believed that I was probably at my best with about 3 seconds work, not 6 minutes work. And so I really had to get underneath that system and how I was limiting myself. So and I didn't at the time, you know, have particular support. There were some brilliant figures around Cambridge who helped me believe in myself. I think the rowing machine, I think Joan mentioned your scores on that, and that helped give me belief as well, because I was seeing those scores improve. So actually I could do something for more than 3 seconds. I was lasting and living for longer. And those around me, learning from others. I was incredibly lucky that I got fast-tracked into the Blue Boat pretty quickly, actually. And after that dev squad, I found myself in the 5 seat of the Blue Boat that year, and I was terrified of letting them down. That was just horrific, because instead of being someone who trained at that sport and could do the sport in my sleep and was worrying about the performance, I was still learning the technique. So that was a really, really challenging year, and I was relying and learning on the other women and my cox, actually, in my crew.
And where were you training that winter? What are your memories of that winter? We might have some blues rowers listening to us. So put us in the feeling of a day in Ely.
Yeah, well, but actually, CUWBC at the time, we didn't have a base at Ely, so we went there every now and again. We'd go and not back boat from a landing stage. You'd have to go off. So get them. I had a little car, Renault 5. You get 5 of us in our Renault, in my little Renault 5. I only did gears 2, 3 in reverse, but you know they're enough to pretty much get to Ely. It's straight, and we'd go out and do those early mornings. But my biggest memory is going to Longridge, which actually I ended up going to train in as a squad in Marlow. And we were lucky enough to be doing a training camp there. We were staying in the scout huts, and it froze. So we went all the way from Cambridge to Marlow to row, and it had frozen. So we were breaking the ice, and we couldn't actually get on the water. So we had to do our rowing in London, that training camp. So extraordinary times at that point. And what about you? Because I think things had shifted for you once you started.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I had a an experience where you and Kath were already there. So the pathway was proven that Cambridge women could do this. And I remember meeting you the first time. You probably don't remember meeting me. It was in Thames Rowing Club, Boathouse, and like hanging everywhere. But for me at the time, this was 2003. They were starting to think about talent ID in rowing. So they were within the British rowing squad. They were piloting what they called the World Class Start Scheme, which was identifying people based on sort of physical features mostly, and that had started the year before. The year before I joined with the current Women's Blue Boat, and Annie Vernon was part of that, who some of you will know of. And I joined that in my third year, so a couple of years of rowing for Newnham in the bumps, and then it was okay. The British women's squad is sculling. They're all going to the Olympics in doubles and quads, and you have to row in a single to do trials. So I really, really, really need to figure out this single sculling thing. So serious rowing for me was a very, very excruciatingly embarrassing Easter holiday, which I spent in Cambridge thinking, right, I've just got to learn to scull. I remember falling in 7 times within a week, being fished out by an extremely handsome bloke who, I wish that wasn't the way that he found me, upside down in the the cab. Never saw him again.
We're still looking for you now.
Yeah, I remember washing my hair with my hands just bleeding in the shower because I'd switched to sculling and my hands, like, calluses couldn't take it at all. And going off, I think, that summer to Race Nat Champs and being like you said, terrified by the whole thing. I don't think that, I've never met a rower in the world, if they're honest, who isn't terrified by the pain and the physicality and the brutality of the challenge that we set ourselves.
And it is that extraordinary place, isn't it, that you find out about yourself. There wasn't the other sports that I had done, and I think there's a few that may be similar, but there was that moment that you could have a bad day at the office and you can reset. And in the sport of rowing, of course, if something goes wrong, have a bad day at the office, you can be so impactful of your team members that it can, I'm going to use the word, sort of destroy that endeavour, if you like. And that responsibility is huge, isn't it?
Yes. And it makes or breaks people, doesn't it? That pressure and the reality of it. And I remember striving to put together a good 2K time, and I pulled some scores one year, and then the next year I couldn't match them, and I kept stopping, and I kept getting to a point and losing the belief and having to wind right back again and do them slowly and just gradually creep up the confidence again, and over the years build up all of these sort of psychological tricks and tactics that had something to get me through every 100 meters and package it all together. But like you, at the very beginning, I saw it as, okay, I've got to learn to scull and I've got to get fit enough, but really it's all about, am I tough enough? Can I really do it? And I know, Sarah, when you moved into the national squad, it was even more brutal than when I got there. So can you paint a picture of what the learning environment was when you went to be a full-time rower, and how did you approach, how was improvement approached in that environment?
And it was an extraordinary time because it was 1997, it was a long time ago, but lottery funding had just come on board. So for the first time, women athletes, and let's be clear, before that, some of our men, a certain individual called Steve Redgrave and those who rode with him, were able to get funded and were able to get sponsorship. Now, he is massively successful. At that point, he was trying to prepare for his 5th Olympic gold medal. So he'd got results. But the women's squad had run alongside him, and there'd been no sponsorship much for that group. They'd been working full-time jobs, and they'd been doing their rowing alongside that. And anyone who's done this, that is massively, massively challenging. And 1997, one, they'd gone to the World Championships. I hadn't got selected. I got sort of a little sniff at it, but I'd been left at home quite rightly on that occasion. And they'd got bronze in the 8 and gold in the 4. So in Sweetport at that point, the thing that we were doing at Cambridge, there was real success. So I showed up at Longridge thinking, oh my goodness, I've been invited to do this. Perhaps I could be part of this. And my God, there's some successful women here. And you asked about the learning environment. And I think it was a tough one. I'm going to be completely honest. The coach had seen the success. He wanted to do more. He thought we, as a group, weren't tough enough. It's back to that tough question. So we trained 3, 4, 5 times a day. My hands were so wrecked. I now was driving my car with these parts because they were the only pieces left. And because the fronts were full of blisters, and I, again, we were doing a lot in sculling, was learning to scull. So the backs were full of cuts where I was cutting myself. And so I was in that point where physically I was so tired. And I wasn't finding that the culture was hugely welcoming. Let's be 100% honest. They'd got success. They had good group of women athletes. They had enough of them. They weren't looking, and they've got a gold and a bronze. And frankly, they wanted to get on with that. And I was learning the skills. So I was slowing people down. I was having to now get in a pair and be in the bow seat of a pair and learn a new skill. And of course, someone who sat on the start line, won a world championship, doesn't want to be at that point with a novice. So yes, it was long days at Longridge. One day I thought I was going to be early, and I was so tired. I'd driven past junction 7, 8, 9 and ended up at the next junction. And I was late, and oh my God, it was a disaster. And I was working out how to row, but actually the biggest challenge was working out how to thrive in that group, or survive, if I'm 100% honest, in that group, because I was really hungry for it. I desperately wanted to be successful in this sport. And the truth is, when you're in rowing, when there's 8 people already successful, if you're going to be so, you have to knock someone off. And that is a really tough thing to start to work your head around when you're the newbie in the group.
So you did get your head around it, because I remember watching you when I was still an under-23. I was still at Cambridge, and you were off to Athens, and you were stroking the double, and you were sitting. So you got to sit on that start line of the Olympic late, lined up against those other 6 boats, and you got to lead that. You got to physically set the pattern for Elise Laverick, now Cheryl, your partner, to follow. How did you get your head in the right place to be able to do that? What did you do? What did you think over those weeks leading up? How did you package your own thoughts? So that you
I remember this was 7 years. By Athens, I was so ready. So Sydney, I broke my rib 6 weeks before the games. I managed to go to the games in a double with Frances Holton, who's a phenomenally successful rower, but we came 9th. The boat I had been in, the quad, got the first ever medal for a women's group. So I had sat behind the stands in Sydney, desperately wanting that quad to do well, because I'd been part of that project, and desperately wanting that quad not to do so well, because I knew if they got a medal, I wouldn't get one. It was the worst and the best parts of me, and that's where I had been in Sydney. So that experience was bruising and challenging, and I didn't like myself. Looking at myself in the mirror at the end of the day was really, really tough when you're going through all those emotions. By the time I got to Athens, the least, we were, we had a tiny group of women actually going to that games. There was just 8 of us, 3 boats, and each one had a chance of a medal. And it was just a really positive group at that time to be part of. Everyone got on with it. We got on well with each other and supporting each other without being too in each other's pockets. And for me, we had got ourselves sort of under the radar a little bit into Athens. So we weren't the favourites by any means. And when we got into the games, the press and others realised that we too could get a medal among the other boats. And so we were managing that part, which was actually quite fun and exciting at that point. And when I got on that start line with Elise, the first thing was it was incredibly hot, and we'd managed to manage our warm-up, so we were in the best physiological state we possibly could be. And I just turned around to Elise, and by that point, all we needed to do is execute that first bit. The first 3 strokes were all we were going to think about, and know that we'd done the training, the time, the preparation to be able to do the rest. I'd like to say I was excited. I was quite excited, but I was deadly nervous too. Making sure breathing out, because breathing back in is the bit that keeps you alive.
And you got a bronze medal. It was historic. It was the first Olympic medal in that boat class. But it was a bit of a warm up for you, because then you went into the quad after that, and that's when you really hit your best form. So how did you step on between that Olympics and then the World Championships, where not to spoil your story, but Sarah's quad sort of dominated the event for a few years then?
Yeah, and it was an amazing thing, because I think having got the success, I'd realised the times that I hadn't got medals. Actually, we'd been so close. It felt that I was so far away from it. I remember rowing is so tough at the World Championships. There's 6 lanes in a final. 3 of you go one way after the final to get your medals. 3 go the others. And I can see there's a question there talking about we've been introduced as Olympic medalists, but how much should we actually be talking about whether we've got a victory or the other parts in the wider collaborative? And hopefully we will make sure we do touch on that, because I went the other way for an awful lot of races for an awful lot of years. And that was tough and disappointing, but it absolutely added fuel to the fire. And I was getting closer to that medal zone. We were moving on. And having got the medal in Athens, I remember kind of reflecting that evening, and I was shattered. I didn't go out and party particularly. My friends and family, we had a dinner together. And then some of my friends and family went to party, and I was done. I went to bed, I'm afraid, because it had been that point where you think, I've got this far and I'm the same person that felt so disappointed. And I wanted to see what we could do. And as a group of women, 6 of us of the 8, all who had Olympic medals, plus yourself and others, were coming back to training, and there was just an exciting feel about it. And I think we shifted from am I the best I can be to are we the best we can be? And I think the culture and the learning became better. And I want to hear from you on that, because that was our intention. I know we didn't get it right all the time, but we wanted to create a legacy where we were lifting people up, not pushing people down through fear of losing our places or not being selected. We wanted to create this basically how people saw sportswomen in this country. We wanted to change that. We wanted to make it a really positive, and actually at that point I think we wanted to be role models. And I got selected for the quad. We went out to Japan. It was an extraordinary, we had a great summer where we won pretty much everything. We lost a couple of times and learned. And then the Germans, which hadn't lost the quad in a World Championships since 94, and this is 2005, they basically watched our performances and they thought they were going to lose. So they shifted their best athlete, Katerina Boron, from the double into the quad to try and challenge what we were doing. And I've never had a race like it. It was a phenomenal side-by-side race. We went out as hard as we could, and then they were up on us. We thought, that's fine, we're going to do the next 500 harder. They stayed up on us, and we pushed again. And this is amazing how we had the belief in each other and pushed early. And Boron actually looked over, made a very small mistake. And Bex, who was sitting behind me, saw it, and we took our opportunity. And we won that race by 0.3 of a second. I don't think there was more than 0.34 between the 2 quads the whole way down. It was just an extraordinary thing to be part of. And what we were beginning to see was how the way we were training and the way we were racing was making our results fast, but it was making the squad's results fast. And that was really, really energizing and exciting.
I remember watching that race, and it was my first senior international. Well, it was first World Championships. But you'd said the difficulty is you come into the squad and you have to take somebody's seat. And I think for my generation coming in, because there'd been that small team in Athens, the 8 was created out of, there were no people for the 8, and so a young group came in, and I was part of that group. So we were there watching you, quite thinking, how are they doing that? What do they do? And so I guess you were looking, you're aware of this younger part of the squad coming up, and what would you have told? What would you have said to us, or your youngest, the younger version of yourself? But at that regatta, you probably did. We were a bit overwhelmed. But what would be your advice to those people just starting their first World Cup?
And it's interesting. I think I remember our conversation in Thames actually, and I think you were talking about what else you could do in rowing as well. And I kind of made the inference that you might be able to do other things, but that you wouldn't have the energy that you thought you'd have when you were committing to that full-time piece. So I think being kind to myself, my younger self, I often gave myself a really hard time, said things to myself I probably would, well, I know I wouldn't say to another human being out loud. And the difficulty was it got results. So I thought, oh my goodness, I'm making myself better through this. And it's interesting, if we had Kath here, she would be talking about the long win at this stage, because how do we really manage ourselves through this piece rather than beat ourselves up just over, those moments and results. So be kind to yourself, but also commit, because you're absolutely able to do more than you believe you are. And test and chance that.
I was furiously watching and trying to learn everything that I could and analyze everything to death. Watch how people rowed, watch how people trained, watch how people, ate, watch how they recovered. It's kind of, I felt like I had to fast track absorbing all of this knowledge, whereas of course for you it was more a case of working it out from first principles. Whereas for me, we had this, this winning group. And it was incredible to be part of, to watch that sort of that discipline and confidence, and to be in a team of women who were all strong, powerful, capable, intelligent, and also thought that this group of women should be the best women's rowing team in the world. And this is how we do it. And I thought, yeah, this is how we do it. I just watch those girls, Try and glean everything.
I do love that. Yeah. I look back again, and I talk about that time in '97 when I went to Longridge. Steve was training 11 minutes down the road in Leander. There was a group of men who were knowing how to win medals, and yet we didn't get curious enough, or we didn't go down and go there. Now, Leander at the time, you couldn't be a member as a woman. So it wasn't a training site you had a choice to go down to. We were told to go to Longridge, and that's where we would be. But nobody put a fence around us. Nobody stopped us actually going to get curious. And that's a bit of a regret as well. I learn from everyone. It's that extraordinary piece. Absorb where you see good. And actually, if someone's not doing something quite right, or you think, kind of manage your judgy self, because we can all judge each other very, very quickly. Somebody might be doing that because it's actually the best thing for themselves.
So through all this, Sarah, were you learning what you thought you were learning? Were you learning how to be tough? The thing that you set out to learn?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I became tough. But actually, I think I was learning to be, and it's again to have this, more collaborative. I was learning to learn. I was learning my limits and when to come back from those. So one of the lessons I often have to keep on learning is when I'm disappointed, not to just work harder. That was a sort of young Sarah's default, and it worked. When I was younger, something didn't work, well, throw a bit more energy at it and it'll make it better. But actually, from this space, and certainly when we became the best in the world, just working harder wasn't going to make us win or quicker. We were going to have to do things better and look at things in a different way. And when you're sort of starting to play at those margins and those edges and get the performances you and Catherine started to create from the back of that, it's not about, it's working clever, it's being smarter, it's using your thinking brain and knowing when to stop as well, which is really, really challenging when you're motivated and you've got things you want to do in life.
So you've progressed a lot, even since you've retired. You're now an umpire. You're involved again with the university and its growing. And has that been a linear progress? How do you see the nature of progress over that time? Is it been what you expected?
Yeah, it's been phenomenal what we've seen. The women going for the Tideway, amazing opportunity for that group of women to break boundaries and race the championship course. Now the club being combined, I think that was really important. I don't think there was any doubt that actually when the men and women's squad came together really before Athens in the national squad, both results became better. And what we're now seeing is we've got the boathouse where everyone is allowed to train at Ely together. I was there just the other day. The fleet is fantastic, and it's a really positive training environment for men, women, and lightweight. So you've really got others to learn from it in that space. And I think the other thing that we had, and of course Cambridge has in all sorts of places, how do we learn from others around us? So we ended up going to Bisham Abbey, and you could watch the hockey players and the synchronized swimmers and others, and you'd watch these incredible athletes finding the limits of their bodies in different ways. And you're thinking, well, if I can do that, well, my legs are twice the length, but I'm not going to be a hockey player or a synchronized swimmer, but I can go a little bit away towards them. So watching all those groups learn, and I think that's a really positive thing for the university. I think it's positive for the student athletes as well.
I think we're starting to get some questions coming in. So shall we roll into taking some of those?
Yeah, Anna, shall I ask this one? Because Sandy Nare has asked about marginal gains, and is that idea still relevant?
Yeah, I mean, marginal gains, I don't know how you think about this, though. It's very popular, very zeitgeisty, it's very simple. And I think, Dave Brailsford, who talked a lot about it, has done a very good job of giving something a catchy title, which I think that most, academic-minded people, which I think most of the people here will be, just understand as, chipping away at stuff in an organised fashion. I think what I find fascinating about marginal gains is it's choosing between all of those things. I think when we were training, we'd have our goal, which is, obviously to win the Olympics, really easy to say. But then how do you break that down? And we break it down in a whole bunch of dimensions. For Catherine and I, we wanted to be, wanted to have the fastest middle thousands, so we could dominate them. We also wanted the fastest start. We also wanted the fastest finish. And then we could break that into physical and psychological, attributes, and we could break that down then into very practical steps, which, as you'll know, Sarah, it comes down to sort of 20 grams of protein within 20 minutes of finishing the session and that kind of thing. So, and those are the marginal gains. But the thing is there are hundreds of them. There are thousands of them. So many things that you could do. So how do you know which ones you're going to fill your time with in order to make that day be the most productive day and the biggest step forward that you can? And then another thing that you very quickly learn is that if you have an amazing day where you've done 100 million things, the next day suffers for it. So then it becomes about recovery and sustainability, and you can only train as hard as you can recover, and your recovery becomes a huge part of those marginal gains. So I think what I'm fascinated by, and I've always been fascinated by, is where's the biggest bang for your buck in terms of, and how do you measure those things? How do you relate a psychological intervention or a nutrition intervention to some time down the rowing course, so that you can be totally strategic about which of your marginal gains you should do. So I think, my answer is it is relevant. It's relevant everywhere in business and in life. And if you're a geek like me and you're sort of into data science, then that's one of the most exciting things you can do with data is you can really start to ask questions and form hypotheses. Does this really affect business? Does this really affect the value proposition and so on? The aggregation of little things is too simplistic, because we have to somehow decide which ones to do.
And I think that's really interesting, isn't it? So Dave Brailsford had Matt Parker, who was head of my marginal gains during that lead up into 2012. And of course, we're looking at British cycling in all sorts of ways. But what Matt's job was to do was to actually go, right, of all the things we could do, what will we do? And in cycling, which is where it was made famous, there were some disruptors as well. They were able to do some disruptive changes to their technology. So change how the bikes work, make the wheels rounder, as they like to call it. But actually, the truth is they were changing the suits. They were changing how the feet were going onto the bikes, and they were changing the bikes actually bent a little bit and put energy back into the system. So they were able to disrupt technology, which didn't have to be available on the open market. So they could do that R&D research, and as long as the UCI ticked it off at different World Cups or races, they could then put those different changes together for the Olympic Games and get a massive disruptive change, which was fantastic. We had hollowed out logs, didn't we? Our boats basically had to be available on the open market. You couldn't change your equipment in that way. The rules in rowing have been very clear about that. It's a minimum weight, so it's a quite heavy hollowed out log. And so we had to really think about those marginal gains about us. And I think the piece, Anna, that I'm most curious about is your recovery piece, because I think that was one of the things watching you that you were, I wish I would have been better at it, because I was so rubbish at stepping back at times, and I would do it because I knew I needed to do it, but then I'd be guilty or I feel guilty, so I wouldn't get the true benefit. How did you use your data to give you those points when to step forward and when to step back?
Yeah, I mean, it's a data piece, but also, like all problems in life, it's a people piece, isn't it? So the first thing was to go too far and too hard and too much, and do that a few times, so that I kind of knew deep down that the problem wasn't with my sort of ability or willingness to push myself. I remember training camp the summer before Beijing, and we went off to Cyprus and we did some 4-session days, which was new for me. And I thought, I'm going to do everything 5% more. That's how I'm going to do the Olympics. I'm going to win by doing 5% more. And I just got, ill by the end, glandular fever, and the whole year was just then a survival mission to come through. But I sat on the, that year was a scramble. And then the following year, I then rode in the double with Annie Vernon, and it was a better year, but I felt that I hadn't peaked at the World Championships. And I felt that I had gone too hard in the training camp beforehand, and I was still coming back up, and I didn't have a sprint, and I needed a sprint in that race, and we didn't have it, and we got a silver medal. And I was furious. I was absolutely furious, because I thought, I finally know to judge this recovery thing. I know my body well enough. But the relationship with the coach at the time, I couldn't say it, and I couldn't nut it out to say, I need to do less, I need to back off now. And I went to him and said, I'm off, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't want to sit on the start line feeling like I've done less than perfect preparation, or less than my best preparation I can do. And if we can't nut this out between the two of us, then I don't want to do it if it's going to be less than best effort. And it sorted out our relationship massively. From then on, it was kind of acknowledged that there were people around me who were, or Catherine Granger often called herself a shire horse, because she could just take a seemingly unlimited amount of training, but I was a bit of a thoroughbred, a bit delicate. and that if I did too much, I was liable to get injured or overtrained, and it happened a lot. And so it was about knowing myself and knowing my limits, being confident enough in myself to know that my best training was not necessarily maximal training. It was about consistency. And this is something that I'm talking to loads of people about at the moment, because everybody's into sustainable performance and well-being. And it's that ability to choose when you need to be good. And if you're choosing when you need to be good, then you can't be at max all the time, because you're then at the mercy of, of fate, really, as to when you'll have overdone it. So it was like that. And I'm honest enough now, I never did a Sunday training session when one was set. I knew it's too much.
And it made you go faster, isn't it? And I guess that I'm hearing some leadership lessons in that space. So there's something about relationships and trust, isn't there? And being able to have the honest conversation. Your relationship with the coach, as you said at the time, wasn't in a way that you could put your hand up and have that conversation. Actually, I think my relationship with myself got in the way with that at times. So it's really looking at that and trusting and knowing, I think, when those peak performances need to be. So in business or in life, in what you're doing, when are those points where you really do need to peak and make sure that you can bring that up? And looking for the questions, I think you are, Anna. So we've got one from Pat Marsh. She's going to Ely in the morning. So she's on the 5:30 a.m. squad with the squad, which is fantastic. Hi, Pat. Nice to hear from you. And she's asking us about the financial aid and national level from the lottery funding, which I talked around. And she's asking, when training at college and university level, did financial issues create problems for you or for us? And how did you manage with that?
Well, do you want to take that one first from your perspective?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was so lucky in a way that I'd taken a year out between school and university, and I'd worked as a pre-university employee for IBM. So I had amassed a little bit of money in that year, which actually allowed me to do run a car while I was at Cambridge, which was really good. I was lucky enough to get a grant, so I had a bit of money behind me. But I don't have any, and this isn't a sub story, but I don't have any blades. I never bought those because I didn't have any spare cash. And actually looking back at the student Sarah, having a little bit more money and being able to eat a bit better food, better nutrition, I think I would have recovered better as well, whether I had the time and the energy to do that and the bandwidth. So I think having a little bit of a nest egg behind me really did help me at that point. And I'd had a tiny bit of support from Sports Aid as an athlete, which had helped me by trainers and bits and pieces when I was coming through. But I think it was tough to be able to manage it.
Yeah, I think if I can reflect on not doing a gap year, I was properly skint as a student, and obviously no grants or anything, and no athletic palmares to fall back on and get Sports Aid funding or whatever at that stage. And it was an issue. It was an issue to buy the kit to row for Newnham in the bumps. It was an issue to find £100 to go to Longridge for a dev squad camp. And it was off-putting that if I had gone to row for CUW, they looked like they had a lot of kit, and they also had training camps, and they also, needed petrol money for this, that, and the other. And it looked like it would cost about £1,000. I think people had said it costs about £1,000 to grow for CUW. And I just didn't have it. And my parents didn't have it. And it was, it was a factor. And then, and I didn't row for CUW. That was one of, that was, it wasn't the only reason, but it was a reason. And then later when I was trying to scull, I'd borrowed a Yanisek from Rob Roy, and people had said, this isn't going to quite do, and you're going to need a better boat. And I, how do you get a boat? Costs about £4,000. Don't have £4,000. Parents don't have £4,000. And it was one of the other students. It was a PhD student called MJ who'd been coaching at Newnham, and he said, I'm going to buy a boat. Yes, you can't buy me a boat. That's ridiculous. People can't just buy people boats. He says, well, I'm just going to buy a boat, and it's in your size. I'm going to put it there. And that's what he did. And I paid him back how many years later? I paid him back about 5 years later when I got a rowing grant. So I was reliant on the kindness of people like that who were kind of adamant it was going to happen. It was going to happen somehow. So
and
not everyone's in the same situation.
Yeah, and Pat's asking, would an award like the Hawks and Ospreys Charitable Trust have made a difference to you if there had been that there? Do you think would have changed that decision making, that barrier, that financial barrier? And I recognise it. I remember having to find £35 when I was 11 to go on an athletics week, and I remember begging my mum for 35. It was a huge. I can tell you now how much it was. It was £7 a day to go, and you had to have the right trainers as well. So it was extraordinary. But because I was able to beg for that money for my mum, I actually got allowed into the athletics. They invited me into the club. They waived my membership, and they waived the £50 a year it costs to use the track because they saw talent. But you have to have the kindness of others or people to give you that encouragement, because financially it can be massively scary. Would a grant have made a difference?
Yeah, I think it would. Yeah, I got £100 from Staffordshire Moorlands District Council. That was great. I remember that. that made a difference. That was quite a bit of petrol money. Annie Vernon had a car. She drove us down to Dorney. So again, you find ways, but there will be people for whom that tips the balance if there's an award, definitely.
So Pat, keep shaking the tin. We're saying yes, you're going to make a difference to athletes, and it is expensive, and asking the bank of mum and dad can be a real challenge. They give you so much already, haven't they? And it's, if you are training a number of times a week, the normal Saturday jobs that perhaps your friends have done just aren't available to you because you're out competing and training on those times where you might be earning a little bit of money in other ways.
Yeah, it's so true. I was just looking at the clock there. I think we've got 2.5 minutes left. So I'm going to ask you my one favourite question, Sarah, if I'm allowed to, which is what is it that you do now every day that you would not have done if it hadn't have been for your sporting career?
Every day. So I think the thing I'm most grateful for, Anna, is the relationships and the friendships, particularly the women I met and I walk alongside. So I probably talked to somebody that I trained with, that I cried with, that I won with, that I lost with every day. And I simply wouldn't have done that without my sporting career. And they give me strength. They give me strength when I still can't find it myself. What about yourself?
That's awesome.
I love your question. And Joan, I'm going to come to you next. We want your answer too.
What I do, I hold my head up, and I've got, I came from a not typical rowing background, and I hold my head up and think that it can work, and I try to tell other people that it can work, and that you don't have to be perfect, and that you don't have to have everything worked out at the start, and I tell it to all my friends every day, and they don't always believe it, but that's always my go-to with everybody's problems. When I'm supporting people, you don't have to be a certain way, you don't have to be fit a mold or be perfect or do it the way that you think, because there is a path.
I love it, and your way might, and if you can do it your way and be authentic and throw yourself into it, you might be better than all the rest of them as you ended up being. Joan, we're going to throw it to you if we're allowed. Go on, your final question.
Ladies, well, I think sport has taught me to be tough, basically, that when things go wrong, you just keep on going. But I think since we've got 1 minute to go, I need to say huge thanks to the ladies, Anna, Sarah. I've enjoyed it hugely. I had so many questions. I'll have to ask them to you personally. We've had the pleasure of 2 really inspirational athletes and speakers, and it's sad that we couldn't have Kath as a third person. I'd just like to say to everybody, all three of Kath, Anna and Sarah have put a huge amount back into Cambridge sport and to UK sport. So we all have a debt to you ladies, and thank you so much for everything and for being here tonight. And we've got 15 seconds left. So does anybody want to say anything? We'll just thank the audience for being here. We can't see you, audience. I recognise the names of some of the questioners, so thank you. That was super.
Thank you.
Oh, maybe we have more. Oh no.
I think we're